Welcome to this session on Harvard Generative AI tools. I'm Emily Bottas. I'm the Managing Director of Academic Technology at HUIT, which stands for Harvard University IT, in case anyone is not aware of that acronym. And today I'm going to be presenting with Sebastian. Sebastian's here. And Mitch, who we all saw this morning. What we're going to do today quickly is we're going to skip introductions for now. We're going to move on. I'm going to give a quick demo of the Generative AI Sandbox, the history, et cetera. And then Mitch and Sebastian are going to give examples of the use cases that they're using within the sandbox. Then we'll have some Q&A, and we're going to make the sandbox available for people to play with it themselves. So, some background on the sandbox. In the spring, ChatGPT pretty much took off, became very popular very quickly, and just about immediately, Harvard, HUIT, was looking to get enterprise agreements to provide ChatGPT and other kind of AI, generative AI tools to the community. At the time, none of the vendors or creators of the tools had enterprise agreements that we would agree to. I'm not sure if people are aware of this, but whenever we bring software to campus, we do a variety of things. We look at the vendor and we make sure that they are handling our data with an appropriate amount of security, right? And so we have an information security team that looks at that vendor, what they do, what their practices are, and says, yes, we feel comfortable putting Harvard's data on this service. So we do this for Google, we do this for Microsoft, we do this with Amazon. And then additionally, we also, in that contracting kind of negotiation, we also make sure that if they were to lose our data, that we're compensated appropriately. So there's a lot of legal going back and forth. And so because this was so new, a lot of the LLM, like ChatGPT, the offerings didn't have enterprise agreements and were willing or able to negotiate with us yet. This is how nascent this technology was in the spring. And so we knew, the school kind of formed three major university-wide committees. One was on teaching and learning, one is on administration and operations, and the other one is on research. And so as part of those committees, we really learned that there was a large appetite for using generative AI in classrooms this fall. And so, in early August, we began to develop a solution. And we developed that solution with vendors that we already have agreements with. So we're using Microsoft and OpenAI ChatGPT through Microsoft. We're using Anthropic, which is another LLM that I'll get to, through Amazon, and another one through Google. So we have existing data privacy agreements with those vendors. So we're able to make sure that if someone puts in an unpublished paper, we know what's going to happen, that those vendors are secure enough for us to feel good about that. And so in early August, we began developing this. In the spring, HUIT has what's called an Emerging Technology and Innovation Program. And we had some developers within HUIT who were very interested in this technology and did some early pilots. And so we were able to leverage those early pilots into building this sandbox pretty quickly. We started in early August, and the pilot began on September 1st. And then the question was, how do we invite people to do this, right? It's still a new technology. It's a pilot. And so the members of those committees were invited to invite others in, and to about 50 use cases came in through them. And so I'm going to kind of go over what those are. Next. First, I'm going to do features. So features of the sandbox include multiple large language models, or LLMs. So there are a variety out there. We selected 4 that we're going to go over. We're allowing you to provide context to these models through a cut and paste mechanism. Most people saw Mitch this morning try to get, Bing to ingest his PDF. We don't have that capability yet. You have to take the text from the PDF and cut and paste it in. I'll show how that works out. And then multiple context window sizes. So the way that these LLMs work is through kind of tokens or text, roughly text sizes that you give to it. And so a certain amount of text you can share with it. You can't share War and Peace. You can maybe share your dissertation. And so those are the sizes that we have. But over time, the windows have become larger, and so we're bringing those into this piece. We're also keeping your message history, so you can see what you did and asked before, and what you have now. And it's fully encrypted end-to-end, so it's meeting the data privacy and security needs that we have. In a future release, we're going to work on file uploads so that you can send it your PDF, and it will actually open that up and be able to use it for you. And then in the future, we're not going to build this into the sandbox, but at HUIT, we want to make sure everyone gets the latest and greatest tools. the ChatGPT code interpreter that Mitch used this morning, we're going to actually get enterprise agreements with OpenAI so we can make that available to those who need it. And similarly, image creation, we're going to look at options in that space as well. Okay, so just to look at what the pilot use cases are. So, we asked all the pilot members to tell us what they thought they were going to use it for. What we found there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of courses were interested. People were interested to let students complete assignments, generate new quiz questions and assignments with the tool, just, overall demonstrating what the capabilities are, how it can be used, generate responses to exam questions in preparation for, grading, teaching plans, outlines, compare writing with that of AI. I've actually done this to my daughter to make sure she wasn't using it. She wasn't, thank God. And then, experimenting with kind of case method, kind of what we saw this morning with Mitch as well. And so to date, we've had over 900 users in the pilot, 12 courses, and all of their students have been added in as well. And so there have been over 300 active users. This is kind of what we expect. As the semester goes on, those other courses are going to become active users as we go along. And there have been over 4,500 questions asked, and then the OpenAI GPT-3, 5, and 4 have been the most popular models. I know I'm saying a lot of stuff here. Does anyone have any just questions in general about this before I jump in? Okay, great. So now I'm just going to kind of go into the interface. So this is the sandbox. Let me just make it a little bit bigger for us all here. It has like a very big chat box where you enter in your questions and kind of work with it. But I first want to show, we have links here available to the university's information security policy, just in case you're wondering, what you can put in here, what you can't. It lists it out. Additionally, it says, hey, you can only use up to medium content, and it goes into examples as well. So if you're using it, you can see what you can do. And then we also have some guidelines and instructions that are available as well. Getting started, terms of use, how to write better prompts, et cetera. So there's just some information here to help you with this. So now if I just go in and start typing, a question. So, the most basic thing you can do with these tools is just asking it questions like you would Google, but it gives you an answer. You don't have to sort through results, which is really great. And so if I say, what is the difference between micro and macro economics? Oh, okay, so it's going to tell me what the difference is. There are two branches. They study different aspects of the economy. We can actually close this so we can kind of see it better. Great. Now my next question is, well, which one impacts my mortgage? Macro. Good. Great. I know who to blame. And so, and then, okay, well, I'm going to ask it, well, what are the current mortgage rates? So it doesn't have real-time information. The text that was, added and trained on ended in September of 2021. So it knows what it doesn't know. And it's, it doesn't look at real-time information. It has a context boundary. And it will tell you when you hit it. So other than kind of the main basic kind of question and answer, we have a selection of multiple models. And so we have 4 models, 2 with 2 contexts here in them. So we have Claude, GPT-5 with a 2K context and a 16K context, GPT-4, GPT-4 larger context, and PaLM 2 Bison, which is by Google. And so if we, where am I? We look at these models, the way we kind of evaluate them is thinking about them from an aspect of quality, cost, and then speed. And so each of these has a bit of a different profile. And so, as we've kind of been working this out, we have some best uses for each. So for Claude, best use is really analyzing or creating large text because it comes out of the box with a very large context limit. You can give it up to 12,000 tokens. Its strength is its high context limits. And the other thing about Anthropic and Claude is that it has the triple H, which it's built to be helpful, honest, and harmless. It won't let you do some things. You can say, I asked it to tell me a story, and I asked it to make the story more macabre. And it said, no, I'm not doing that for you. That's not appropriate use. But GPT would let me do that. So it does have this very interesting kind of philosophy behind how it's built. Then we have the GPTs 3.5 and 4. 3.5 is our default. It's great for content creation, basic coding queries. It's kind of a general purpose thing. We chose it because it was a little less expensive, but still very good model. And then we have GPT-4. It's really great for complex reasoning, deep comprehension. It's 10 times more advanced than 3.5, and we offer the 1K and 32K versions of that for context, text that you can put into it. And then finally, Google's PaLM2 Bison. It's interesting. This one, we've noticed that it kind of understands idioms and nuanced text from various languages. And then it also has common sense reasoning. It's multilingual, and the context limit there is 2K. So that's what we have there.
Question.
Yep,
Where
totally.
does it gather its information if it's not connected to the internet? Or
yeah, so it's historical data that it has actually collected its information from. And so most of these models have looked at what's public on the internet. So Wikipedia, anything that's out there, and they've gotten into some trouble with this. Additionally, GitHub is a big repository of open source code. It looks and trained itself on GitHub for coding as well.
So does it do like a scrape and then have all that information and then people keep feeding it?
Yeah, so they stop feeding it at a certain point, but they get this database, all this data, they kind of convert it into a bunch of numbers and then do all this analysis and complex math. I don't think we have time for that now, unless someone here knows, and I'm more than happy to have anyone answer it. And then it, creates this database, and it's a probabilistic return on what next word would come out.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is cost relevant to Harvard users?
So for the pilot, no. I think, the university's been very generous in supporting the usage of this pilot. Eventually, we're going to have to figure out how to make that sustainable, and it's something we are talking about. So right now, cost is not a big factor. It is something that you see in comparisons of models kind of out in the world.
In setting this up, did you do anything that is particular to education for this process in terms of configuring a language model or anything like that? Or is it just kind of a no?
We did not. The thing that we did was just make sure it was safe for use with security and data privacy. We didn't. And what Mitch and Sebastian will talk about are how it is being used there. I think as we bring in commercial tools, which is kind of the plan with ChatGPT, we'll probably look at that more. Like, how do we make Harvard-specific, education-specific versions of this that meet our needs in different ways that the enterprise doesn't? So the other thing you can configure is temperature here. And this is a bit of an interesting thing. So temperature is a parameter that controls how predictable or unpredictable the results are going to be. And so the lower the number, the more predictable. And so when you know that there's a right answer, you want it to be predictable, meaning you're going to get the same answer every time. I mean, this is a probabilistic technology, right? You can ask it the same question, and you might not necessarily get the same answer based on your temperature, is really what it comes down to. And so we think you should use lower temperatures when you want the same response, when it's like, hey, a factual question. As you kind of get up into the more unpredictability, when you want it to use larger vocabulary and be a little bit more creative with the data asked, write an email to my boss about something. Look impressive. You want that to kind of go up in a little bit. And our default is 0.3. And then as you increase it, if you want increased creativity within a realistic boundary, you're looking at 5 to 7. Write an essay about why AI is not as powerful as humans. And then finally, once you get above 7, like here be the dragons, this is where you're getting into ultimate creativity. It's leaving the factual world behind a little bit. And it's more likely to hallucinate in this area. But no matter what you select, the more context you provide, like we saw Mitch this morning asking it to do very, very, very specific things, the temperature is not going to matter because you are kind of reducing the randomness with those number of questions and the parameters that you're putting into it. But we do have it here for someone to play with as you kind of go through it. Part of the pilot is to show people what AI can do. And this is one of the settings that we felt like we should show, even though it can be a little finicky and funny.
Kind of expand on a previous question. The data is pulling from, is it open? Thank you. Is it just everything that's out there, or is it a specific library it's pulling from, something restricted in terms of a pool of information?
So each model pulls from different sets. I think I could get back to you on exactly what each one is pulling from. Most of it is open. There's been some issues about people pulling in copyrighted information and other things are in there, but it's typically what's open on the internet and then what's in kind of large repositories. And I'm more than happy to follow up more on that.
Is this temperature scale something we developed here at Harvard to use with the tools, or is this coming from the tools themselves?
Great question. This is coming from the tools themselves. And when you go to ChatGPT, you don't have the option to do this. The only way you can get to it is through the API, and we are using the programming application interface to do that. So that's why we made it available, just to see if there's any relevance. The pilot is about feedback. We get feedback. Is it useful? Is it not? We're going to learn and then kind of think about what we do going forward.
Was there a decision made to not include the other parameters?
Such as, what are the other ones?
Nuclear sampling,
Yeah,
otherwise,
yes, absolutely. So our developer's not here. He could definitely tell you that, and I'm more than happy to have him follow up. But yeah, we opted to make it much simpler for more generalized use and the amount of time that we had to build it. Once we add more features, the more testing we had to do and get reliable answers was one thing as well. So going back in, so the other thing that we have here is the history. So you can see your chat history. So you can see I just asked what's the difference between micro and macroeconomic. Yesterday, or actually this morning, I was looking at this and I was playing with temperature. And I was using ChatGPT-4 with a temperature of 0.1, and I asked it to complete the sentence, the chicken. And it said, cross the road to get to the other side. Great, thank you. And then I went with a temperature of 0.9, and I said, please complete the sentence, the chicken. And it said, cross the road to reach the field on the other side where a bounty of grain lay scattered, glistening in the morning sun. Now you see the difference in temperature, but it takes it's hard to find a question where you're going to see this. This took us a long time. It took me a long time to find it, until 12:45 this morning. But so that's really what the temperature looks like. So now quickly, I'm going to start a new chat. I'm just going to show, this is always a little, fixing that. And so I actually created, via this method, some fake data from a fake video game test, a driving game. And I asked it to create me data with a name, a rating, an improvement suggestion, and what they loved about the game. And so I have this data that I can copy and paste here. I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, here is some data about with user feedback from video game testing. I'm actually going to select Claude for this first one. And then what I like to do when I put data in is end it with a few hashtags. Please summarize this data. Great. So Claude went in and kind of gave a pretty good summation about what happened. We got 25 testers, the ratings were on a scale, the average rating, highest rated aspects, it's telling me common suggestions, etc. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to GPT-4. And what's interesting with this, because we have the multiple LLMs within the same interface, you can switch, and we're going to send it its entire context. So now, when we ask this question of GPT-4, everything that you've asked is getting sent to it, and it's going to respond to that. So now I'm going to say, can you please tell me the top 5 suggestions for improvement?
So is this information you've put in, you said it's available now for the GPT-4 to use after you've switched.
Yeah.
But can somebody else access this now?
No.
Or is this just for you?
This is just me.
Okay.
That's why it's called, everyone gets your own sandbox. So it's private. This is new. This is great. Oh, look, it came out in the history, but it didn't come out in the chat. I was just a little impatient there. Apologies. Sorry. Okay, great. And so then from here, I can go and select Palm Bison. If you remember, that one was pretty good with languages. And I can say, my development team is in Brazil. please translate this for them.
So would you need to have subscriptions to these generative AI systems in order to use this,
Nope.
this system?
No, we do. We have, Harvard has bought the subscription, so we have it for everything. And so here it is translated this, which to, I believe, is Portuguese for the developers in Brazil.
Can you, how sticky is the history? So you're not logged in because it's just calling you user. And if you were to close the window and reopen it, would it have your history or would it start all from new?
Yeah, it should still have my history. This is running in a container behind the scenes. When that container is rebooted, it would come up. I'm done now, so I'm more than happy to close the window and come into another one. It's still there. I can log out. It just doesn't have my name. I just look, this is, again, a shortcut in the time frame that we had going on.
Emily, it's probably worth mentioning you got here via your Harvard key.
Yes, thank you very much. Your Harvard key is how you get into this. Good point. Thanks, Mitch. Any other questions?
Are you able to use the plugins in GPT-4?
No, we're not. Not here. Yeah. It's kind of like we're at a race now, like how much we do here versus getting the enterprise agreements in place. Like those, we are now working with OpenAI to get those. And so we're having conversations about how do we support both use cases and what are the appropriate use cases for each. And some of those advanced capabilities are definitely what we want to support.
So in terms of the training data, you said that the training data for one of the models was through 2021. Is that training data different for the different models? And are there any that are up to date in real time? Either with Harvard or
Yeah, nothing
outside?
that we have is up to date. I'm not sure. I know ChatGPT 5 is coming out somewhat soon. I'm not sure what the data is on that, but it's typically older data because they need to test it. We can get that information too. We have a couple questions.
So practical question. Could I use the sandbox to create a questionnaire in Qualtrics? Because Harvard has a license with Qualtrics.
So we have our Qualtrics. You can, David, do you want to, sorry, cold call, but we.
No, I think we have two Qualtrics people here. You could use it to formulate the text of your survey, but you would still need to move that into Qualtrics yourself at this point. There is some, I think, file ingest options you could look into to automate that process, but there's not a direct link between the two services.
Emily, can I just add one thing?
Yeah, please.
The answer to the question, can it do X, is almost always, unless it's dangerous, try it. Like you want to ask hypothetically and go looking and go researching. The answer to any of your questions of can it do X, as long as it's safe, is to see if it can do X.
Great. So that is it for the demo of the sandbox. Mitch?
So I have been fortunate, thank you so much to Emily and all of her colleagues, to have had the chance to use this in my course this fall. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about how we've been using it. I want to tell you about the course just so you understand how this is positioned and all that, how I introduced the sandbox so you can imagine how you might do such a thing, and then show you two use cases. I also want to say that these are, very, very preliminary use cases. So I'm not up here saying this is very advanced or this is very expert. In fact, I was picking up things even from Ethan today that I would add to the exercise I'm going to show you. So I suspect that I'll use this in more and more advanced ways even as the semester goes along. So we'll stay tuned for all the rest of those things. But I'll show you what I have for now. So the course itself is a course on public entrepreneurship I teach here at Harvard Business School. And it's a course about invention inside government and by private startup companies for government. And our courses here are typically 26, 27, 28 sessions, 70 or so second-year MBA students. And they're predominantly, because this is Harvard Business School, case-based. We have this big question we wrestle with all throughout the course, which is, can we actually solve public problems anymore? And the answer that the students are meant to try to resolve over the duration is like, well, there's this proposition, which is we can solve public problems if we're more inventive, more entrepreneurial, and we sort of weigh whether that's true and if so, how. And we do that over 4 modules, one on getting new ideas, one on actually trying things that are risky in government, one on selling things actually to government and buying them, and a fourth on scale. Just to give you some context, where we are in the course right now is this ideas module we've just finished up. Most of what I'm going to show you came from that part of the course. I wanted to show you before, though, what my guidance was to students as they enrolled in the course, okay? My guidance on how we use AI generally, and my little planted breadcrumbs about the looming arrival at the time of this sandbox that Emily introduced, okay? So first of all, you'll see that I told them we're going to experiment with these tools, and you'll see that I told them for a very important reason, which is we have to figure out whether or not these tools can be useful for solving public problems. That's a looming, real question in the world. We have to try to sort out for ourselves, so we're going to use these tools. I told them we would get early beta access to this tool, and they were excited about that. And I told them more broadly. Here, we're all told to tell our students what our AI policy is. Here's my AI policy. It's encouraged in preparing for class. Encouraged in preparing for class, but not in ways that undermine our education, not in ways that violate our policies, and absolutely disclose your use. It doesn't make things better. Worse, rather, even makes them better because we're trying to learn from each other. Okay? So that's the course, that's the policy, that's the context. The first step was to introduce the sandbox. And I wanted students to know a couple things as I introduced the sandbox to them on what was our third day of class, which was how to get to it. That's important, how to find it. So this was the way they could find it. They all were granted access by our registrar so that when they entered their Harvard key, they were given access to the sandbox. Where to find the terms of use so they know what they were doing. The fact that this was a pilot, Emily mentioned it was a pilot, it was important to set the stage for students. So many of us want to make sure that the students are getting something polished and concrete and well-rounded, and I said, that's not what this is. This is an experiment. It's going to change. It may not work. I really set the tone for this, and of course, that's, by the way, a meta lesson of the whole course. I told them how to experiment with the temperature, as Emily has showed us. I told them that new models might actually be coming, and in fact, you saw the additional context models were added even as the course has been underway. By the way, I sort of told them some models may go away. I don't know what Emily and the team are doing, and so told them all this. And as I said, we were able to actually get them the tool and up and running and useful for them by the third day of class. We started actually quite early here at Harvard Business School. Okay, so I want to show you two use cases relatively quickly. And the first case, as I said, both are in a ways rather introductory. The first case is more introductory in a way than the second, which is I just began adding Gen AI questions to all of our assignments. Okay, these are not Gen AI assignments. These are typical assignments, typical cases. We're going to have a discussion in class, but I added Gen AI assignment questions to all those assignments. So for example, I teach a case about a gentleman who led essentially this sort of entrepreneurial skunk works part of the U.S. Special Operations Command. The idea was to get in more new ideas for our elite warfighters, and he's been doing this in a very agile, inventive way. He's been nominated to become Undersecretary of the Navy, and the question he gets from a U.S. Senator is, and this is how the case ends, is what that you've done or learned at SoftWorks, the small, agile, special cell, can apply at the Navy writ large. Okay? We have a discussion in class about many things that have nothing to do with Gen AI, but have to do with organizational change and agility and all the rest. But I added a question that they had to prepare for class, which is to use generative AI to help them prepare for their confirmation hearing. Okay? Can anybody just think of a prompt you would use if you were doing this to prepare for a Senate confirmation hearing? Somebody? What?
Chaos.
Chaos? That's not a prompt. What kind of chaos should I anticipate in the United States Senate would be a prompt. Any other ideas? Yes?
I am preparing for confirmation hearing in the U.S. Senate for the position of blank. My background is in XYZ. What kinds of questions should I expect?
Lovely. What kinds of questions should I expect? Lovely. Okay. So, and very much, in fact, one of the A students for the day suggested the same thing. A second case, I teach this case about the city of Seoul building a metaverse version of itself. And in that case, they've rolled out, actually very apropos, they've rolled out a pilot version of their metaverse that had about 300 people, also still apropos in a way, respond back about how the metaverse is going for them. And they've gained or not some insights about that. And one of the big questions for class is what, if anything, did Seoul learn from this pilot? And there, I actually asked the students a special AI question, which was use generative AI to try to simulate citizen feedback about the pilot and compare this fake feedback you got to the actual feedback that the city of Seoul got in our case. Can anybody think of a prompt you would use in these tools to actually get the tools to simulate what might be feedback on a metaverse in the city of Seoul. Somebody, come on. What would you ask a Gen AI tool if you wanted to understand what the citizens of Seoul felt about a metaverse? Yes.
I mean, I guess I am a user. I'm someone who uses this metaverse tool. Let's see. What's my question? What did I think of the use of the tool? What were the things that worked and didn't work? What were my impressions?
Okay, maybe. We could certainly try that. Any others? Yes?
Please give me 5 sample feedback responses from citizens of the Seoul Metaverse. Ensure that each feedback is provided by a person with a different age, economic status, from a different neighborhood of the city.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so building on I'm one person to I'm 5 potential people, and I've got a bunch of different personas, different places. Absolutely fascinating. Okay, lovely. So, I teach a case about actually a company was trying to make food stamps, public benefits for food nutrition easier in this country, first enrollment and then benefits checking. And one of the big issues in the case is just how cumbersome essentially the 12-page form for applying for food stamps was in the state of New York at the time of the case. And the prompt here was use Gen AI to create a SNAP application form or parts of one. There had been some interesting research by some doctors at Brown and elsewhere where they had ingested actually dozens or hundreds of medical forms and then used Gen AI to make them actually better for the patients. And I invited students to read that work and then see if they could do the same thing for a government form. So, I mean, sort of the prompts that roll out here may be somewhat obvious, but any maybe non-obvious prompts you might have asked here trying to create a better SNAP application form? Yes?
Well, I might prompt it to create a better SNAP application form by looking for and leveraging research on challenges with current forms.
Fascinating.
Pointed towards
things
I know to exist.
Fascinating. So interesting. Hadn't thought about that. Yes.
Could one also ask kind of this question and then tell me how this might work for people from different backgrounds, men, women,
yes,
young, old?
Fascinating. Yes. And one question, by the way, I don't mean to proselytize about these tools. I mean, one question we should be asking is what's going to tell us useful, fair, or does this perpetuate a bunch of bad biases? I mean, you really want to investigate, but these are lovely ways to think about this. Okay, so I teach a case I've written about a former student of ours who organized a hackathon in her hometown of Cincinnati to try to address the opioid crisis that was happening in Cincinnati. One of the big questions for the case, just so you're not totally unnerved, is like what kind of solution to a horrible academic is a hackathon anyways. But one of the questions in the case is they have these 8 challenges that they've created for the hackathon. And one of the challenges of any hackathon is to make challenges narrow enough so that people coming can actually make some progress, but not so narrow that you basically prescribe what the solutions are going to be. That obviates the reason for having a hackathon in the first place. And so we had that conversation in class. That was one of their assignment questions. But I gave them a Gen AI version of the assignment question, which was to use the AI to develop a list of challenges that they could have brought to the hackathon. And then, very much to Emily's point about temperature, actually zoom in and zoom out on those temperatures, either literally with the dial or just with your words, telling it to be more or less specific, and then compare those to to not only to Annie's challenges, but what you thought about Annie's challenges now that you have this extra insight. Okay? So, obviously, the course is going to go on, and I'm just going to keep doing this until the students, basically start hating it. But use this to craft experiments, use this to draft an MOU, use this to craft a 2-sided platform. Really use these tools. Okay, and so we'll let you know how that goes. Okay, so that's basically one use case. How can you basically just incorporate this into what you're teaching right now? A second thing you do is actually just change what you're teaching right now. Do something entirely different you were unable to do before. And I want to tell you about that as well. So pretty quickly, because I want to make sure we have time for our second set of use cases. So I just earlier this week created an exercise that I call Storode. And it's an AI exercise, actually. And here's how it works. I wanted an exercise that would come at the end of this module we did in ideas. I wanted to help the students apply some of what we learned about where you go for ideas. I wanted to focus them on a specific common problem, and I wanted to pick one I thought they could all relate to, but that they wouldn't know a ton about. So I decided to focus them on this issue of storing. And And many of you will recognize either because you've probably seen some clips like this or even been on the road when you've seen a truck do this. But every year, especially when college students arrive, but not only trucks basically run into, heads are shaking, trucks basically run into these bridges. And so I told the students, like, this is our overall high-level prompt is we have to solve this problem, okay? So here's what I plan to have them do. Use generative AI via the sandbox to better understand the problem at first, okay? First, problem understanding. And I split the room in two. I have students in my class who want to start GovTech companies. I have students in my class who want to work in government. So imagine now two sides of the room. I gave them each 15 minutes to work in pairs or triplets, just because with some of this prompting stuff, it sort of helps to have a buddy to kind of egg each other on, even as we just saw here. We would then debrief. So they would basically use the Gen AI for understanding the problem better. We would debrief as a group about how that went. What did you learn? What prompts did you use to generate that learning? And then repeat this time on ideation. So 15 minutes to do some ideation in the sandbox, and then a debrief. What ideas did you come up for solving storing, and what prompts did you use that led you there? Okay? And I wanted to create actually some stakes. I mean, many of us are teachers, and it's good to go into class and create some stakes, some energy, some tension. And so then I used GPT-4 to create a game. As Ethan said earlier, we're all coders now. I know I cannot code a lick of software. But I created this game, actually, just to be honest with you, the morning of class. And actually, I did 80% of it in about 5 minutes. And I spent another 55 minutes kind of tweaking it. But I created this game. And the game works like this, that there are two trucks. They advance the overpass basically every second. And they're going to hit the overpass in 30 minutes. But if you give me a great prompt or a great insight generated from your prompts, I might click the button that sends you back 10 seconds. And so the two teams, the two sides of the rooms were basically, in a way, competing. And you can imagine many more sophisticated versions of doing this, actually evaluating prompts in the way that we can now evaluate prompts and evaluating ideas in the way we can evaluate ideas. This was literally me being like, good answer, oh, you caught a hallucination, 20 seconds back for you, that kind of fun stuff, okay? And what do we get? So first of all, on understanding the problem, some students had some sort of obvious prompts. Do you know what storing is? Why is storing happening? They had some more specific prompts, like where else does storing happen? Or how much do truck and bridge interaction accidents cost every year? Turns out this is $1 billion problem around the world, something you'd find out if you used Gen AI correctly. And then the students had some rather inventive prompts, which were like, create a truck driver named John who has Storo and use the principles of design thinking to then interview John about his accident. Or do a fault tree analysis. Some of you may know that kind of problem diagnosis analysis, do a 5 whys. Some may know that on a Storoing. Or convene an expert panel of 5 people and tell me the perceived root cause in each of their views. By the way, I want to say, Ethan made a really good point this morning, which is we can teach people about how to do prompting well. So this was very sort of like students trying to start to figure it out on your own. You can imagine I could teach them from papers that have been written by colleagues here and elsewhere. Here are great prompts for using in understanding problems. Now use these and see what you get. Right? You could do this in both ways. This was very much for them to sort of come up with that on their own. Same thing on ideation. So on ideation, some common questions, right? Provide 10 ideas for ending storing. I want to start a company to fix storing. What are some companies I could start? They also had some unexpected prompts. This one was definitely not one I had expected would come up. And for some incredible reason, actually 2 separate students used this as their prompt. Anyways, you can try that at home. The winning idea, we voted at the end of class. I mean, I had been having so much fun, and so the trucks were sort of both relatively even, and so we had to decide, which truck was going to hit the bridge. And I said the winning idea will give their truck 10 seconds back, and the other one will hit the bridge. The winning idea was the Safety HILT Information for Trucking Act. It was legislation to shift liability to the navigation app companies and to the trucking companies. 3 of my JD MBA students, so they're at law school and the business school, had asked GPT-4 to go in this direction based on what they learned. And I thought it was a lovely example of where they had used, their own human insight and interest. They want to be lawyers also. And what they learned about what was going on here, which is using the tool, which is trucking companies just don't care. And then they put that all together and asked it to create legislation. And of course, not just that, but I pushed them a little bit afterwards, which is ask it to give you a clever acronym, which it successfully did. Okay, so just in finishing up, and I'll turn it over to Christian. So some very, very early reflections on the use of the sandbox in the classroom and sort of a little bit on the use of AI in the classroom. So first of all, the sandbox gives the students access to more models than they are using. Most had only used ChatGPT in the free version, and as Ethan told you, that is subpar. Okay, so this is actually, like, you might look at it and go, oh, it doesn't look like, that different from what is out there, but the truth is they're not accessing our students the paid versions of what's out there. So this gives them access to a bunch of models, some that they would have had to pay for in any event, all in one place. This was a really big feature and a really big benefit for the students. But the exercise was really necessary to invite their inventive use of the AI. I have to say, before we had the exercise, I was giving them these assignment questions, and they weren't really using the AI very much at all. I think our students have yet to wake up to how powerful this could potentially be. So as teachers, I think you have to actually, if you just give them the sandbox, I don't think they're going to use it very much. You have to build exercises, build reasons to actually invite their use of these things and show them how useful they can be and give them the kind of, let them explore their prompting on their own and then give them some expert prompting and get them up the curve here. Students that had been given some guidance in other courses just on prompting, but not the tools, love the chance to have the sandbox to apply them. So I literally had students who would come from a great class we have here, our colleague Jan and I, some others here. George Seraphim was teaching a great class on climate. He had one of the founders of our D-Cubed Institute talk about how you use great prompts to solve climate change problems. Amazing. But he was mostly demoing. The students literally walked out of that class, a handful of them, into my class, and then they could use the sandbox to do that stuff. It was very, very useful for them to apply the tools. As I said, students without guidance struggled to get deeper prompts at first. No surprise. We're teachers. What do we have to teach students? One thing we have to teach students eventually is how to prompt well. So there's no really surprise there. And again, after, but only after the exercise, not before, the students started to say to me or their classmates how much this made them realize that generative AI was going to change their lives, change their jobs. So lastly, I just want to say that my interest here, I started sending around, look at the game I created, and look what I'm doing in the sandbox, and talk about it at lunch, has generated other faculty who are interested. And in fact, I sent one to Emily's team, Rem Koning, the other day, who's going to, I think, use the sandbox in his course later in the fall. So if you're using it, share what you're doing with other people. As you hear interest, ask whether they can get granted access and we can build a kind of flywheel here. Okay, thank you very much.
I'm Sebastian Schmidt-Dazan. I'm the Assistant for Academic and Strategic Planning at the GSD, and I am fetching this cable. So in my role at the GSD, I'm responsible for curriculum planning, academic technology, institutional research. So please don't think that I'm the GSD expert on AI. I'm really not, so I don't want to leave a bad impression of my school here. I am, however, a member of the Teaching and Learning Task Force that is university-wide on AI that Emily mentioned in the beginning. And in that role, I also was tasked with the task of creating an AI policy for the school. So about a year ago, just like I think most of us probably, I had not really had any interaction with AI and then came into it and then put sort of I'm a historian by training, put sort of the literature research skills to use this summer and worked on that policy and familiarized myself with the tool or the various tools that are available. And I just want to talk a little bit about what I think AI and these tools could be useful for from an administrative perspective as well as a teaching perspective, because I think in some ways we often draw distinctions in ways that isn't always helpful because there may not be that much of a difference in some ways of how we work with artificial intelligence, which also I'll note isn't really intelligent. So there's some of the things that I learned that I always appreciate when people mention them or that I found really helpful when I first got into this topic is to think that and I mean, it's a lot what it does, but all it does is to predict really the next token in a series of tokens, right, that you give the tool. So if you, like the chicken example was a good one that Emily gave, complete the sentence and, the tool would basically analyze all of the corpus of information that it has and then find that most of the time when somebody in whether it's a self-published romance novel or whether it's some blog post on the internet starts a sentence with the word the chicken, it usually ends in some kind of a chicken joke. And so this is where this sort of simulation really, or maybe simulacrum of knowledge, I think comes from. So one of the things that I'm working on is a revised version of a teaching and learning policy. This is just for the context. So this is a larger project that I had hoped I would, have done by the end of this month, maybe. I'm not sure if I'll get there, but I just want to touch on that to see what I think some of the opportunities are. So the place that I'm starting from in my work is that we have an existing guidelines for instruction, which is a long and lengthy document that's been accumulated over a long period of time. We have something called a studio culture policy that was an old accreditation requirement for our architecture programs. And then we have a new accreditation requirement that's called a learning and teaching culture policy. And then we have sort of a smattering of different pieces of help texts and guidelines for specific tools on our website. And my goal is to turn this really into one teaching and learning policy, and then separate the more foundational principles of what teaching and learning means at the GSD from the operational guidance that is more calendar-based and really step-by-step for the faculty. So there's something that I want to say about, well, this is what review feedback should be like. This is what review culture should be like at the GSD. And then we'll have a section, a separate guide that talks about, well, this is what you have to do if you have to invite reviewers. This is how you schedule your review. This is how you secure space for your review. So those are very different things, and this is the project that I am tackling. So what the AI can help with, and these examples have come up, is summarizing text, shortening text, writing tables of contents, analyzing things, writing outlines for you, and then even splicing things together. And again, I don't have this full case developed to go through it, and maybe I'll send out a link, and once this is published, you can see if it actually worked on our website. But for now, just looking at the volume of these guidelines for instruction, for example, of 13,000 words, is a really unwieldy document. But what I did do, and I mentioned this is a new accreditation requirement, right? The so-called learning and teaching culture policy. So this comes from the National Architecture Accreditation Board, or NAB. And they handed out or they have available on their website a template document of what this sort of policy could look like. And so I asked Claude in this case, and I worked with Claude for this particular case and the one that I present after, to create a table of contents of the policy which didn't exist and add a slide summary for each section, which it did wonderfully. And I can now use this and then think about and put it next to other content, because then I can put this table of contents into the tool, and I can add text from my existing guidelines for instruction, and I can ask the tool to allocate certain portions of that text to these headers. So it can help me structure and get sort of a sense of what is even there right now, because otherwise the alternative for me is to sort of try to map out in my head or manually create these sort of indices of these tools to understand what is there and how the pieces fit together, because there's very different styles of writing, very different origins of these documents and what they're trying to do. So kind of bringing things a little bit onto one plane is where I see a lot of opportunity for this. However, this is where that work has stopped. So like I said, I was hoping in some way, we talked about Emily last week, was like, hey, you've been talking about these use cases in our task force meetings. Do you want to present next week? And I was like, sure, I can knock out this whole project in a week and then present it. Obviously, that didn't happen. So instead, I did, however, turn to another, I think, really current and really important topic that has been going around the university, which is the new non-discrimination and anti-bullying policy that I'm sure you're all familiar with. However, to whatever degree, we just had a full faculty meeting this week where Sherry Charleston joined us to talk about the policy. So that rollout and socialization of that policy, that combined policy, which is sort of two but one, is going around. So I put the prompt into Claude to say that Harvard University recently released this below policy. So I copied half of the policy, because Claude only takes 12,000 words, I think, and or tokens, and it's longer than that. So I split it into non-discrimination and bullying, anti-bullying, and I'm just focusing on the non-discrimination part here. So I put the entire policy there and then asked the tool to summarize the most important aspects in a few paragraphs, and then provide a bullet point list that breaks down the complaint process. Please, and I'm always observing myself with a chuckle and wondering if it makes any difference whether I say please or not, because again, I'm sort of trying to think in the mind of the AI. If I'm getting this prompt and I'm supposed to respond in a way that is the most likely response to that input that I'm getting based on my predictive ability, I would probably compute a different response based on someone saying please or not. But I don't know if that's actually how it works. I just always hope for something more gentle. So here's the first part of the summary, and it's really wonderful. I have to say the quality of this is, in many situations, especially on the first prompt that's quite specific, really, really good. So this actually, if you're familiar with the policy, you'll find that this really matches what is written in there. It does manage to pull out, I think, some of the aspects, and this is a long policy. The entire document is about 22 pages in PDF, pretty small font. And it manages to pull out things that are really the cornerstones of what this policy highlights, right? What are the protected classes? What or categories? Who does it apply to? What situations does it or does it not apply to? And then how does the process work? And this is the second part right here. You can see the complaint process is laid out in exactly the way that it is presented in the policy. So it's a kind of an executive summary, really, of the policy that the policy itself doesn't have. Could be a great addendum, maybe. And then I continued and said, again, here's the non-discrimination policy, and now I'm in a different position. I'm organizing a training on this policy for members of the university, and I need 4 different case studies for a training exercise. Please create 4 case studies of complaints that are covered by the policy and can be used as teaching material for this exercise. For each study, please provide the context of the complaint, introduce the involved parties, and explain how the policy was used to address the complaint. The case study should reflect a variety of protected categories and should involve different community members at a research university, including students, staff, faculty, researchers, and contractors. And here are the first 2. And the first one felt almost predictable, no pun intended, to say that a female graduate student complained that her advisor, a tenured professor, made inappropriate comments about her appearance, and so on and so forth. The second case, you can see a staff member who used a wheelchair complained that a building on campus was not accessible as the only entrance had stairs and no ramp. He reported this to the local designated resource as discrimination based on disability. Now, of course, you might already stumble upon this, but there are some wrinkles here that I find. So in the first case, I find it noticeable that the graduate student's gender identity is immediately identified, whereas that of the professor is not until the very end, where there is one gendered pronoun, not pronoun, no, it is pronoun, I guess, possessive pronoun, at the end, right there, his. And then the second case, I don't think actually falls under this policy because it's not that unless somebody on purpose scheduled repeat meetings in a non-accessible space with somebody who needs an accessible space to get to the meeting in person, it doesn't feel like it's a discrimination case. It's more an ADA compliance case of saying, well, this is a non-accessible space and you're not going to file a discrimination complaint about this. So I'm sort of starting to think, I don't know if this is really hitting the mark here. And I have a couple other cases that we could look at that fit the case a little or fit the specifications a little better. But let's focus on the first one. So I then asked for each of the 4 case studies, add more detail and include a bullet point list of each step in the complaint process. So for this first case of the female graduate student and the male tenured professor, this is what Claude came up with, that the student reported the complaint to the department chair. The department chair brought it to the local designated resource. They opened an investigation and then interviewed the student and the professor, et cetera, et cetera. Now, again, if you're familiar with the policy, you will find that it is not typically in a case like that the local designated resource that would actually conduct the investigation. They appoint an independent investigator to do that. So I then told the tool, after highlighting this fact that the LDR is not actually the resource that would handle the complaint, to please correct the above case studies, and this was true for all of them. So it really generated the same this same structure of bullet points and then the investigation steps for each of the 4 case studies. So it's becoming kind of more, the more feedback I give it and the more that I ask for specifications on something, the more it sort of ran into the kind of same corner, just using slightly different personae in this sort of stage set there. So I then again corrected it, saying that the investigations are carried out by an investigator, not by the local designated resource, and the LDR only determines whether a complaint rises to a level that requires an investigation. So then the tool complies, of course, and tells me that the LDR actually appointed an investigator, like should have been mentioned in the first place. And then the LDR reviewed the findings and recommended the professor to undergo sensitivity training, which again is incorrect because it is not the LDR, according to the policy, that does that. It's actually a determination panel. So I go back one more time and explain to Claude that it is, in fact, this panel that is made up of at least 3 neutral members from the central office's list of trained determination panel members. And then, lo and behold, in the correction, after always agreeing that I'm absolutely right about all of the sort of flaws that I'm pointing out in the responses, Claude comes back to me and then says that, yes, in each of the 4 case studies, again, that's exactly the same, the LDR appointed in exactly a 3-person determination panel because that is the minimum number. And yeah, and so this is how this goes on. And that's really the end of the case study already. But so you can see that I think there's a lot of opportunity in using the tool at certain basic levels. I found it extremely successful in just getting summaries of things, getting outlines together, getting a sort of table of contents. But the moment that I challenged it with trying to actually apply the logic that is communicated in something like a policy document, it starts to, at least it felt to me like it was more following the prompts and the direction of the prompt that I was trying to take and sort of pleasing me in my requests rather than actually going back to the policy and being more truthful to that. So thank you very much.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes, so maybe two questions for either Mitch or Sebastian.
No, this is for Mitch or Sebastian, or for you, Emily. But I know that if I go back to HLS and tell my faculty colleagues about all these great things I learned, you're going to get a lot of emails saying, "Can I have access to the sandbox?" So yes. I'm just curious what the process is, because obviously we can't just log into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're still in a pilot phase, and so we are taking requests, but we can't. We're kind of filling them as we go and watching how the performance of the system is. So I do have a QR code that will bring you to the request form. And then from there, we're kind of looking at this every day as it goes along to determine what we're going to do next with that.
Emma. That was my question. I'm interested in more opportunities for administrative uses.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else, anyone?
Yeah, I was actually just wondering if Mitch could share some information on sort of student progress and what students learn, particularly I think the first example where they went through the cases and you gave them assignments to use it.
Yeah, so my main observation, I'll just talk loud. It's easy for me. My main observation is that they didn't learn that much in the early assignments. That just asked them to use the tools on their own didn't force them very much up any learning curve. But that after the exercise turned out to be much more fruitful because they were maybe made to do it in class. They heard what their classmates were doing, and so there was some learning that was going on there. And also, I did do a little bit of coaching. I think Ethan made a great point. Also, like if you give them some more helpful prompts to just move them along a little bit, then they start to get more creative. So my main observation was just giving them the tool and telling them to use it, not a lot of learning, designing exercises around it, and doing it with some peer feedback and some expert feedback, quite a bit more learning.
Do you think over the course of just that time that you've used it, that the students just feel much more?
I think that there's I would say they made 2 steps, and I think there's a lot to go still. The first step they made was, oh, I should be using these tools. Like literally, I have a bit of a disagreement with Ethan about this. Like he thinks that the world's ignored the fact that all their students are using this. I think the fact is all the students are not using this. I mean, they're mainly not using these tools here at Harvard, at business school for sure. And so just getting them to use these tools turned out to be a harder hurdle than I would have ever thought. And so the first learning was, oh, I should use these tools. The second learning was this more of this big epiphany, life-jarring, learning, which was, oh my gosh, this is going to change the way work functions. So I think those were 2 big mental leaps they've made even in just 4 weeks using the sandbox. Yeah.
One more? Anyone else?
This is for Sebastian. For the use cases where you found mistakes when you provide a long document, did you try multi-step agentic or was it just one short process?
So everything that I showed was sort of a sequence of questions, right? So it was all one conversation, if that's what you're asking. So it starts with presenting the policy and asking the first question to summarize it, and then say, generate the case study, and then do this. So in theory, in my mind, the same sort of body of knowledge or insight that would have been generated and applied to, or that would have been applied to creating the summary, should have then been reflected in the case studies and how they were handled by the tool. And that wasn't always the case, right? So while the summary was correct in pointing out how the process would work, that same sequence of steps was then not followed in how the individual case studies were analyzed by the tool, if that makes sense. So this is where, again, I wasn't sure to what degree it was more responding to the need that I was expressing and what I wanted it to do, and then following that sort of to the T, to give a perfect response, as opposed to actually being truthful to the policy that I had fed it in the first place.
This is all very exciting, but if the sandbox then becomes campus-wide, how are we going to educate all of our students in the use of it, as well as the faculty? How are we going to normalize it? Because right now I'm thinking there are some kids who are going to be able to use ChatGPT well, and there's others, and this is so exciting that there's these other options, but how are we, what do you see in the future over the next year?
So like I mentioned earlier, we're looking at the sandbox and enterprise agreements with OpenAI and the other tools that are available. And so what we provide is still a bit of a question. However, the training question is valid no matter what. And so the 3 university committees that are looking at this, that is a big question that's coming up. And so I think that executive committee is going to look at this holistically at this point.
I also just think you have to think about it on a school-wide, class-wide basis. It's your job as teachers to educate, help the students learn on these fronts. I mean, Ethan pointed to his paper with Kareem Lakhani and Edward McFarland and some other folks from our school here that they just put out on consulting. But the fact is, this tool may be a great leveler. It takes people who are actually maybe not at the top tier of performance and move them up that tier. So it has a great potential to do that. But we have to put it in their hands and teach them how to use it to help make that a reality. The last thing to your question we want are students sitting in class where one student's a power user and the other person's never used these tools. But I don't think you can rely on like Harvard University to solve that problem. You as teachers have to, in your schools, in your courses, with reason, context-based reasons, the stuff you're trying to teach, put these tools into your curriculum and raise everybody up.
Last one. I think it's time for lunch.
I was interested in the game that you developed. Did you develop that in this sandbox tool, or was that external? Or?
Can you go to the sandbox? Or look at Sebastian's. Was your computer? So we're not going to do it here, but I'll just show you how you could do it in the sandbox. If I go to GPT-4 and say, please help me make a game, I need your help writing it in HTML. I don't know how to code. The game has 2 trucks. They are heading toward a bridge. They will hit the bridge in 30 minutes, but also create 2 buttons. If I click a button, it will send a truck backwards 10 seconds. Please make 1 button for each truck. So, I mean, we're going to go to lunch, but you'll see, I hope, it's going to produce a bunch of HTML code here. You just take that HTML code, you paste it into a doc, you save it as a .html, you open up that file in your browser, and you have a game. It's that simple. Now, so if we were to play this game, you'll see it doesn't work quite right. The things aren't labeled the way I want them to be labeled. And, I wanted 1 and 2 in the truck. And when I first built it, the trucks didn't look very trucky. And so, you just keep going. Like, you run the game. We're not going to do it here. And you say, can you make add a little small box to the front of the truck? Can you label the box 1 and 2? Can you make the font black? Can you, by the way, the funnest thing was at the end, I said, can you make it look like when the truck hits the bridge, the top slides off? And literally from here into HTML doc, open up in your browser, you have a game. And I literally did it the morning of, I woke up and did it the morning of class. And I cannot write a lick of code. If I went into here, I probably could figure out how to change the font color, but probably not. So yeah.
If I can just piggyback on that, I also tried the diagram that didn't show up at first. I was thinking, oh, I'll get ChatGPT to generate a prompt for DALL-E that then would generate this diagram for me. But it was so nerve-wracking and didn't work out, and I spent almost an hour and a half, and then I spent 5 minutes actually making the diagram. Even though I gave it very specific language to put into each box, it would return lettering that I'd never seen. It was sort of as if you had put, Roman letters on top of Thai letters on top of some other alphabet, and it was completely non-intelligible. So there's definitely limitations to this, but I've seen in theory some experiments where people were quite successful using one AI-powered tool to generate a prompt for another AI-powered tool, and then generate successful output.